So separate from the lawsuit and the other stuff, one of the other things I wanted to talk to you about was, pre, I feel like it existed into the last TV deal, but it did taper off. We used to get speed weeks, not just TV coverage, but media coverage. Now there's like not even like there used to be NASCAR media days, and they'd have all the paint schemes debuted. Like here's RCR's booth, and that's when you would see all these new partnerships and paint schemes. And now I don't know if it's because we've got Twitter or X, we've got we have Facebook and Instagram, we have all these other ways you can get the information that they just don't invest in that kind of stuff anymore. But I
Well,
used to look
I
forward to
know
that, like
NASCAR
especially
Radio
as a
still does
simping.
it.
Go ahead.
NASCAR Radio still does media day.
Well, they do, but I mean, I'm not saying just media like where they try and cram everybody into one day. What I mean is, I
That's what it is
remember,
one day.
I remember when I was sim painting in 2015, 16, 2010, 11, 12, and I'm doing all this, you know, the sponsors and the teams would have booths dedicated to them. That's the first time you would see the new Bass Pro car and the new contingency decals and anything like that, like the new Holly EFI logo and stuff like that. And so, again, the way that the media has changed and the way the content is done, I do think that's where we as fans have lost something, that we don't get all this media hype that builds up leading into speed weeks for the duels, which is gone now, or not the duels are gone, but the clash, and then into the duels, and the duels into the 500. Like you had this massive preamble, like, all right, you start out, here's all the people, the moves, the new faces, places, the sponsors. You had this big rollout that set the stage. And now it's kind of all trickled out so much. I feel like it almost takes away from the steam of the build up for the first race of the year, because you've kind of it's so scattered as opposed to like this big punch, like, all right, we're here.
Yeah, you used to have the clash or the shootout or whatever, whatever it might be called. You used to have it at Daytona, and really, and I think you'll agree with me. The glory days of that was when the shootout, or as my dad calls it, the Big Bud Shootout. You know, when when you had the shootout, it was a 25 lap, cautions don't count
Yep.
race. Now before they left, it was a 75 lap race. That was just too long.
Yep.
And you took that away and you went to California where they couldn't fill up the Coliseum.
Yep.
In 3 years, they never filled it up.
Nope.
Albeit this past year they had to run it a day early, but they still had a decent crowd for you know
For
having it
having
a
to give
day
it away for
early.
free at that too.
Yeah, and but that never really had much hype in it, in my opinion. It just they were going too slow. They never got out of second gear, right?
Not
And
real. I mean,
then
really, yeah, you could run the whole race in second gear or third without, or and barely crack third at that. Like
yeah,
the track was not big enough to use even the limited power these cars have now. And as a
and now
result,
they're doing the same thing at Bowman Gray.
yeah,
I
I think they're, I think when it comes to the Clash, the Coliseum, and now Bowman Gray, I I think for some people, I'll say, fans like you and I think it's too little, too late. Like we asked for this kind of stuff, like give us more short tracks. This is not what we meant, though. And
This is not a
the
short track. This is
the
where they do demolition
argument by
derbies
the
on a weekly
media
basis.
has been, well, it's an exhibition race anyway, so it's just treated as a throwaway. It's meant to entice people to come. But the problem is to me, it's kind of like, okay, so when I got married, I took my wife to Bristol. We went to Saratoga, and we went to Lake Placid up there where they held the Olympics. We did a weekend there and some days, and then about halfway through that week, we drove down and I took her to the Bristol night race. And this is before the repave. This was 2005. So this is when Bristol was true, pure Bristol. And my mentality at that time, and it's still that mentality today, even though Bristol has changed so much, is if I take somebody to Bristol and I want to show them NASCAR, the genuine NASCAR experience, if I take you to Bristol and you don't like it, NASCAR is not for you.
Nope.
Because this is, even though it's, we went, you and I went in the fall, and the racing, I enjoyed the racing. The
I
best
did
car
too.
won, the best driver won. Obviously, you might be a little biased, but I mean, I thought he
I
drove
was
a
a little
great
biased.
race.
I was so biased.
He managed his stuff well. I think everybody was just disappointed because we all expected the tire to fall off like the spring, but since they couldn't even figure out what the hell they did to cause that, that was not really a realistic expectation. But either way,
Well, they
that's
fired the
why.
guy that pitched in the juice. So
Yep, somebody peed in the juice instead. But my philosophy at the time, and still is, like, if I take you to Bristol and you don't like it, it's not for you. So now, and that's what we were asking for, was more of that kind of racing, more Bristol, more Martinsville, where people are moving themselves, and we didn't get that. Or back in the rock and roll 400 Chevy rock and roll 400 days of Richmond, to get into the chase, all those kind of tight quarters where they could get on top of
well,
each other.
that kind of goes with NASCAR. They get all this money from the TV deal, and they don't throw any money back into the tracks. They used to seal Richmond every year. When's the last time they sealed Richmond?
Exactly. They say
And
that won't fix it, but I have a hard time
they're
when you have
full of it.
people telling you, whether it's Dale Jr. or the fans or whoever, telling you more horsepower, seal the track, repave this, softer tire, and you're not willing to do the things that are necessary. You just say, "Oh, that won't work," because we tried it in a sim and it didn't produce what we think it'll
The sim is
produce.
what it is. It's a sim.
Yep,
That does
exactly.
not make it right.
Yep, they had their idea of what they thought Atlanta would turn into from the sim. It's turned out totally different, and it's beginning to spread out. Thank God. I hope they don't tweak the package and keep it bunched up. I hope they let the track naturally age, and they will slowly drift apart. I think that
They,
particular thing will start to look like Daytona in the '90s, early
it,
2000s, as
it
it
is starting to look
more
like that,
worn.
and I do appreciate that. It's not Daytona Talladega. It is car good cars can make their way forward on their own, and I like that. And I didn't like it at first when it
Well,
was
the
just
first year, I'll say they were two on top of each other. There was
yeah,
literally no separation. But as the track has aged over, we're going into our fourth year with this.
yeah. It
Yep.
started in 22,
So we're starting our fourth year of it now. It's aged very rapidly. So I think that's good
which is
because
what it was supposed to do.
what you've seen is the separation. And as long as NASCAR doesn't artificially bunch them back up, I think you will end up in a very good sweet spot where you'll have drafting characteristics, but they'll finally be able to pass again like they could in the early 2000s at plate races, where they actually could use the air and make the pass on their own. You don't need somebody pushing you. You don't need help. You just pull out and you can use that drag against the guy in front of you and go by. And so I think that'll help. But to the to the point of that I was making with the Bristol and the races, I think when it comes to going, we tried the Coliseum to prove that we could do it, kind of like the street course in Chicago. We're going to go to Bowman Gray. Nobody asked for that from a fan standpoint. I don't know what they're thinking there because again, I think we're going to look like a bunch of idiots. Honestly, from a sports standpoint, I think it's going to look like a clown show
Yep.
because if the goal of these things, again, the exhibition races, is to hook the next generation of fan, then if you're going to say, come watch our sport, this is what we have to show you, it needs to match what's the other 36 races. And
Yeah, it does.
and the
That's why the
Coliseum
shootout
doesn't
was so
match
great
Daytona.
at
It
Daytona.
certainly doesn't match North Wilkesboro, even, or now they're bringing back Rockingham or Atlanta. Like none of these things look the same. Hold on 1 second, I gotta pause it. So where were we? NASCAR sucks. That's right. Okay. No, it's just Ben Kennedy that sucks. And
Well, we
well,
were
the
talking
minions that
about
support him.
Speed Weeks is essentially gone.
Yeah.
Uh, so they keep trying to give us these quarter-mile tracks that we don't go to during the season to grab other
Yeah.
fans.
Yeah. You're
And
not
then
gonna.
they go And then the first two races of the season are plate tracks where they're bunched up, and that's artificial as well. So then your first race that you're actually showing anything is Las Vegas,
Yep, the
the
first
third
time you're
race of the
actually
year.
showing genuine, no manufactured content. Everything is heads up, straight up. May the best team that executes with the fastest car win. Yeah, is the third race of the
Is the
season.
third race of the season. Technically the fourth
Mm-hmm.
with the clash as we call it now.
Yep.
So
Let's see. So let me ask you this: as people that we started this not so we could join that cluster of podcast people, but just for because you and I like talking about racing together and have been for a while. I've been talking about doing this for a while. Do you foresee it becoming too saturated at this point? Like you've got like Dirty Mo has, before we had a TV partner with one TV show and another TV partner with a TV show, and then you had a couple days a week worth of stuff. Well, now you've got Dale Jr. and them have 6 or 7 podcasts. Athletic has its own. NASCAR has a couple of its own with Harvick's Happy Hour and Stacking Pennies. And then you've got the entrepreneurs or the startups, the E-Steps, who's been around a while. So even though he's not main media, but so he's considered like a startup, but he's definitely got a foothold. Like everybody knows who he
yeah.
is. Break Hard, those guys. And then you got folks like us who just want to talk about it as friends. And if people listen, great.
Well, we got into it because we feel like there's a portion of the fan base, the old guard, if you will, that aren't
Yeah,
listened to. We feel like our opinion doesn't matter. Uh, we stream more horsepower. They say shut up.
yeah.
We stream, go to more tracks, stop going to the same tracks twice, 15 times a year. We don't.
Or instead of
We were
going to
potentially
Chicago
going to
for a street race where you have plenty of good natural road courses, you left 1 million people, 100,000 people in attendance at Road America so you could go to Chicago.
300,000.
Yeah. Okay. So 300,000 people in the middle of nowhere. Getting 300,000 people to show up to anything in the middle of nowhere is a miraculous achievement. And you left that 2 sellouts to go to Chicago, the one of the most gun-ridden, violent cities in the country now, and it's yet to have a good race that was not weather impacted.
The only race that has not been weather impacted is the Xfinity race on Saturday this past year.
Yep.
Every other race has been impacted, and it's you know they keep saying the hype, but I mean I don't really see. I have not seen really a lot of fans there. They do it on the 4th of July weekend
Mm-hmm.
in Chicago. Who wants to go to Chicago 4th of July weekend?
Nope.
I don't. I never
I
will
don't see
want
myself
to.
ever attending it. I'm sure that according to the people that are pro, oh, this is good for the sport. It grows the sport. It gets the sport in front of eyes for people that otherwise. You had a perfectly good racetrack in Chicagoland. Yes, it's not in the heart of Chicago, but this car that we have currently right now races best on the 1.5 mile tracks, and you go out of your way to abandon it. Same thing in
Yeah.
Kentucky. You allowed them to turn Kentucky into basically a Ford staging ground to just store trucks and or store trailers and things like that instead of again, and you spent all this money to buy and repave Kentucky to not use it. And so now you've got 2 really good tracks aging that will probably race fantastic at this point. And the last
Well,
time they did race, put on good shows.
Chicago was almost due for a repave. It was falling apart too far, kind of like California.
Yeah,
But Kentucky was just paved in 17.
yeah.
So it was remodeled and repaved in 17. So it got 17, 18, 19, 20. It got 4 races on it with the stupid PJ1 on the
Mm-hmm.
outside groove. It is now sit for 4 years, or
Yep.
will have thought sat for 4 years after 25,
Was
21,
the
22.
last race on Kentucky?
It'll sat for 5 years. The last race was in 2020.
Was that the one Kurt Busch won? Or was it the
Kurt
one
Busch was 19. Custer
Okay,
was
so yeah,
20.
Custer 120. Okay, but either way, the last 2 races there were fantastic shows, and we just said nope, walked away.
Yep. And the reason, and Marcus Smith said on Dale Jr. Download, we weren't sure whether we could go back due to a bit of the availability of Kentucky to hold fans with COVID, not knowing what was going to go on with COVID. Okay, well, that was 2021.
Yep, we're
We're now
past that.
going into 2025. What's your excuse now? You don't have one.
Yep.
You sat here.
Well, it's
You've taken a race from Texas and
yep,
you run it at Coda. You've
yep, which
taken
puts
Texas.
on awful racing.
Yes, you've taken Texas's playoff race and moved it to the spring. Okay, that was a good move. But why is Coda, a track that you do not own, getting a race over Kentucky?
Yep. Yep. You
Every
pay a
other
fee.
racetrack you own, even North Wilkesboro,
Yep.
has a race. Kentucky sitting here. We, I mean, up until Cup came, we sold out Xfinity or Nationwide and Bush or whatever it was at that time. We sold out every race. 78,000 people there for a Bush race every single year up to 2012. We even sold out the year that we had Cup that weekend, I
Yep.
believe. But when Cup came, twice the amount of people came and they wanted to go to the party. And it created a traffic jam that they were not ready for.
Yep.
When half the people that are coming don't have a ticket, it will create that. Now
Yep.
we
It
have
also
plenty of
tells you
parking.
that it's worth having there because again, I doubt you're getting and the I'd have to look at the TV numbers, but I have a hard time believing your TV numbers offset the loss of butts and seats that you have now taken for Kentucky, Chicagoland. Because I mean, take Chicago for example. All right, so you're going to race in the city of Chicago downtown. I don't need to buy a ticket. I can go watch it from any one of those high-rise buildings. I can
Yep.
go watch it at a bar, but I don't need to buy a ticket where when I come to the track, I do have to buy a ticket. So, and a street race, it's you're all about the party because the race is usually bad on a street race. Um, the track layout has the capability to produce. If they could ever get a weather break, it probably would produce some good racing. But that's not that's not the soul of NASCAR. That's not who we are
No.
as a racing series. You know, we've always been a oval, short track, middle, mid-sized track, big track
Well,
with
we
one
currently
or
have a
two road
CEO
courses.
that's from sports cars.
Yep. So we have a CEO that runs sports cars, which comes to the problem. Another one of my questions for our notes of so to bring it back around how all of this has changed how you consume the sport. For me, we've switched to this platform of this car. And as far as like an on track car, if you just take away the racing portion of it, just the natural stance of it, the visibility, I think they look badass. From because they're finally symmetrical, the wheels and everything, they're aggressive, they're good looking race cars. They race like shit for the most part,
Mm-hmm.
other than for NASCAR, they race like shit. They're probably would be fantastic sports cars, but they're awful stock cars
Well,
because
they
they
don't.
have no give, they have no play up and down, which is part of why you the problems you have, and everybody says you can't unlearn what you already know. You're right, you can't unlearn it, but you can outlaw that shit. You can take away bump stops.
They
You can
did it
take
for years.
away the spacers and things like that. You can put them back on coil bound springs and struts. There's nothing that says you can't, because if you dictate that you will have this shock package and you have this selection of spring options and there are no more bump stops, there are ride heights again and all that, you would fix the aero profile of these cars in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
But this car specifically, when we had I will say that for me, this car, even though I like the visual appeal of it from a diecast standpoint, I like the way it looks. From on TV, I like the way it looks. But it has changed how I consume the sport because this car is so evenly matched for everybody because they've opened up the SMT and everybody can see what everybody does because it's essentially a kit car and you've neutered a lot of the innovation. It's more manufactured racing than I've ever seen, and it's almost it to me in terms of how I consume the sport. It's led me to not consume the sport. I spend more time consuming the sport through the week than I do on the weekend. You
Yeah.
know, I enjoy the storytelling aspect of it more than I do the stuff that's on track because most of the racing all looks the same and not in a good way. Your
Yeah.
best tracks didn't used to be Kansas, Kentucky, Chicagoland, your intermediates. Those used to be the tracks everybody hated going to. Now you can't get enough of them. And oddly enough, they won't put more of them back in.
Yeah. And that's where I was about to go with it is they worried about saturation in the mid '90s. So they started early '90s they went to Kansas. They took two races out to California. They tried to get away from the East Coast. They took races from Rockingham. They took a race from Darlington. They took a race from Atlanta.
Mhm.
And now Atlanta's got two races. We're going back to Rockingham. We're going back to North Wilkesboro. We've got,
Yeah, but
we still
Atlanta has
have
two races that are plate races. So to be correct,
well,
it's not like Atlanta got two races on the old surface or a renewed old surface. They got two races under a new format.
the only reason they have two races right now is that they're pushing to get gambling
Yeah, yeah, they want to build that casino there, and I
in
understand
Georgia.
that. All I'm saying is,
But
in terms of your track, to your point about the schedule where they took, we went from having two road courses and two plate tracks to we have three plate tracks, which account for six races of the season. So that's 1/6 of the races are now that. We have another six races, which are road tracks. That's another sixth of the season. So 2/3 of the season are essentially wild cards.
yeah, well, what I'm saying is they worried about
Or sorry, a
saturation.
third. I'm an idiot. That's 12.
Yeah.
That's a third.
What they worried about saturation, and now I love to bring Rockingham back. I hope it comes back on the schedule. But
Well,
then
I'm
you're
glad
gonna
they're bringing it
have
back at least for Xfinity. I think that for me is probably that and Lime Rock are the two most anticipated races this year. Just
as well
because
as I do, if that race looks good, it'll be on the Cup schedule in 26.
I would hope so, but I don't. At this point, I don't like to put anything past either one of those groups, SMI or ISC, because sometimes I feel like they can't get their head out of their ass or up their ass fast enough to screw something up that's not broken.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Well, but my point is that we've got all these tracks on here twice again.
yeah.
Atlanta has twice, Darlington has twice. We're
Yep, I
having to
agree.
bring it
Some of
back
it
to
we brought back
Rockingham.
to the tradition, and that's good. I love Darlington, and not just because it's a nod to history, but because Darlington is one of the few tracks where no matter what car we bring, no matter what gimmicks they try, the track always wins.
The track always
You still
wins.
have to race the track. It doesn't matter what our format is, stage racing, not stage racing. The track surface wins. The track shape wins. You have to race the race. You have to be disciplined at all times. You can go there and have the fastest car time after time after time, like Larson or Edwards or Truex, and not come out the winner, but one out of however many, because the track still, no matter what platform you put on there from a vehicle standpoint, it still chews tires, no matter what kind of
Yeah.
tire we bring.
The only thing you can't do at Darlington,
Pass? No.
you can't get handicap access very well
Yeah.
there. Would you say that a track that was built in was it 59?
Yep.
You'd say that that's probably paid for, right?
You
Probably.
would think so, yeah. Well, not only was
Well,
it paid for, the governors of North Carolina and South Carolina both received a ton of money from COVID to revitalize their sports and their different
so
industries, and yet
the last time I went to Darlington was in
Charlotte's outdated.
2022, and I went in the bathrooms and I thought I walked to the 1950s again.
Mhm.
Why is a track that's paid for, that had that much TV money going to it,
Mhm.
that had all
Well,
the
and
potential
again, we
to
look at
have
it
money?
from when we say TV money, we're always thinking about Cup. We forget that they get three pots of money at each one of these tracks that have 3 dates. So Bristol, for example, You have two Cup, two Xfinity, one truck.
Uh,
Well, truck and Xfinity and truck go from 2 dates to 1 date a piece
yeah,
sometimes, and other days, but either way, when you look at the age of the facility and the amount of money from the tracks have gotten from the multiple TV revenue contracts, whether it's that or something like Daytona and Daytona Rising, or again California, like when you look at the amount of money that's been given through the 10-year Sprint deal, and then whatever Xfinity's deal was with the last one, now the CW, and all these different partners, either series sponsor or TV partner sponsor, these tracks should be absolute state of the art all the time. There's so
yeah.
much money flowing in. There's no reason for
Daytona
them not all
Rising,
to be like
Daytona,
Vegas or Phoenix, where they have like the neon garage and all the.
Daytona is a fabulous facility. I've been there once since they've done it. Toyota spent 400 million, I believe it's $400 million.
Yep, Daytona Rising
Toyota
was
did
$400
that.
million. It was
So,
it was a very, very unique and neat look. Like, I think watching a race at Daytona is boring because you see them zoom, okay, and then you wait again. On TV, it's different, but I will say the track is next level in terms
yeah.
of amenities, especially for the size of the campus the track sits on, considering there's a street right there, a boulevard, and
Yeah.
you really have to go across it. It's
And,
not like being at Bristol with a campground around it.
and that's where I'm at with it. ISC owns that track. ISC owns Darlington. You go to Darlington, oh, if you were to go to Darlington a week after Daytona, you would go, wait, these are owned by the same company?
Mm-hmm.
Are you kidding me? I took my mother in 22, and she was having a lot of knee issues. So, handicap access was needed. There was little to none. And the fact that they won't take this money and put it into these places just blows my mind.
Well, and another one, it's been mentioned on several of the podcasts throughout the year when they were talking about, okay, where should the championship race go to? Several times they mentioned like it should be, or the All-Star race, either coming back to Charlotte, like should be in the Charlotte area. Go back to Charlotte. You have all the teams there, and you had all this, you know, you gave the road guys a week off. You could give fans an access to the shops and everything, and you went All-Star race, Coke 600 back to back, and that worked well, kind of like the Clash Daytona lineup. But everybody says the same thing, that Charlotte is extremely outdated from a track amenities fan standpoint. Which you wouldn't think, being that one, it's NASCAR's backyard, that this track that sits in their backyard for SMI and for NASCAR would be as outdated as it is, but also that how much money has not Bruton, but Marcus spent every other year. We're changing the damn track. This year we added a new hairpin turn coming out before you go out on the banking. Like, he has spent countless millions of dollars reconfiguring that track over and over again to keep changing up the Roval, which makes it for good racing. I mean, the Roval's a good race. We just wish it was on the oval because the mile and a half package runs so well right now. But he spent all this money on the track surface. Meanwhile, the stands and all the amenities with the stands are still in shambles. Like, it doesn't matter if you, and so we talked about it earlier. I really do think that they have changed this sport into a must watch, not must attend, which is sad
Yep.
because the sport was born from people attending, not from TV. It grew because the amount of people that flock to watch these people do spectacular things, death defying things, and cars that you bought off the showroom floor. Now we're far from that now with these, but I mean, it's really not that long ago when Ryan Newman almost didn't walk away.
Yep.
So I mean, there's still a very real possibility you could die. I mean, Kurt Busch ended his career because he backed a car into the wall and still can't drive right, see straight. Sometime gets dizzy. So it's still a very dangerous sport, and to try change the mentality that people have for wanting to see it to one of, you just turn it on and watch it, even though I love watching a race on TV when it's at the tracks I want, it's just crazy that it's almost like they've gone out of their way to make you not want to come to the race.
Yep. It really does
Which
feel that way.
I will say, so in I don't know if you listened to it, but Jeff Gluck and Jordan Bianchi, when they were talking about, so they answered the 10 questions, Jeff's 10 questions. And Jordan
Oh,
said specifically, so they answered the 10 questions they asked the drivers all year long to learn about each other. And one of the things Jordan said that I thought was interesting, but it backs up my point, is even Jordan said, you know, baseball, for example, is boring in person. He's like, or football or any of these games, like you don't want to be there. You want to be there for the party, but you don't want to be there for the game. You'd rather you get a better show watching any of these things on TV any day of the week than you do going to the track, and you get a better experience, and you don't have the high prices. And all the points he made were valid points. And Jordan's anti like live sporting events attendance wise. He goes to the races because that's his job. Not if he had his choice, he was basically saying he would rather just be watch it on TV.
oh wow.
And I think he's probably right. I think you get, even with all the commercials and everything, I think for most races, other than the short tracks, you probably get a better racing experience watching it on TV, depending on how you consume it, whether that's, stream, radio, whatever. Just because when you get to the bigger tracks, there's just so much of it you can't see.
I I don't know if I can agree with it because I feel like I've always had more fun being at the race personally, but um, I'm super diehard, and maybe that's part of the reason why. I feel like if you're watching on TV, they just miss so much because they are
Oh, absolutely.
focused,
I
they
agree.
are top 15 focused, and you can't they can't get out of their own way and look at who's like this battle for 22nd. They can't look at that, even though it's been raging for 10 laps. Well, when you're at the track, somebody points, well, you're going to go look, and then you're following that because
Yeah.
that's the only thing happening on the track. But you go back and see if TV caught it, never mentioned it, but it went on for 15, 20 laps, side by side or back and forth. But TV can't seem to figure that part out, that just because it's a battle for 22nd doesn't mean you can't show it.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I noticed when you and I went to Bristol this year, and this is just me getting used to the new car. I remember the last race I went to at Bristol before that, which was 2015, Gordon's final year. Um, and that was when they still had well, they started heading down the high downforce package. Uh, what was it, 750 or 650 horsepower? I'm trying to remember, or 550, one of them.
550.
So it was in the 550 range, except for short tracks. Short tracks had higher horsepower. But and then the year before that, they had like some stupid amount of horsepower because they were doing like 200 something off into the corner at Charlotte. Jeff Gordon was when he qualified those. But I just remember when I was at that race compared to this time when I was with you, like you still feel the vibrations in the stands, but it's nothing like it was with,
That's because they don't have as much horsepower.
they've tuned the cars down so much. You almost don't even need headphones on half the time. Like they're
No.
still loud, but they're nowhere near as loud as they were.
The
And
last time you went prior to when we went this fall, they were probably close to 900 horsepower.
mhm,
This was 670. That's 230 horsepower you're missing out on.
yep. Well, I just
So, of
in
course, it's going to
2015
sound
when they
different.
tell them to start their engines and it shakes the stands because it's near 40,000 horsepower with 43 cars starting, and now you're not anywhere near that
They called
rattling
it
that
Thunder Valley
place.
for a reason.
Yep.
You can't really call it that anymore, except for when NHRA is there.
All right, well, we got about a minute left. Anything else you want to hit on for this?
No, I had some notes here for something that we didn't get to cover, so we'll have to do that next week.
All right, no problem. All right, well then we'll call it a day on this one, and we'll see what we go after next.
Copy that.
There's still plenty of stuff to talk about. We got a
Oh
lawsuit.
yeah,
They better settle before January 1st, or they're gonna have to figure out what to do with six charters. That'll be interesting.
that's gonna be
I
very
think
interesting.
I asked Dave Moody, on his thing. I just think I have to wonder if they're going to end up in like an escrow, kind of like when you buy a house. We can't
Yeah,
take it from you yet legally because we're in a lawsuit, but they're not yours either. So it's like
Yeah,
it's kind of like that
it's
kid
definitely
nobody
going to be
wants.
fun.
So be an interesting custody battle.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Until next time, my friend.
Until next time.
All right.